Hey guys, I'm Cole from Taproot Pictures,
Hey, I'm Josh.
and we are here to talk about a recent project that we just did for GMC. Josh, tell us an overview of this project, what it was, what it's for.
This particular job was through an agency. It was through Leo Burnett, which is a national global advertising agency, part of the Publicis group. They held the account for GMC, and GMC Certified service specifically is what this series of spots was created for. And this started back in May of 2024, end of May. The process of landing these jobs really comes down to putting up the right directors, getting the right people in place in the front end to satisfy the creative needs. The creative teams on the agency side are working on this for months and months before we even have first contact about the job, and they're internally creating the concepts and selling that to the client and figuring out a way to really make sense of what the marketing and strategy objectives for the client are. So before the vendor, us, the video production company, even gets to pitch on that job, there's a huge process ahead of time. So respecting that creative process on the front end is really how we can get into the right position to win the job. And from a process standpoint, like we put up a director, Brett Workentine, who I thought was the best fit for this project because of his ability to design and build out concepts and really take the creative and elevate it to the level of work that we want to be associated with. And we worked with a great team on the Leo side from the agency producers and the creative team to work collaboratively to figure out what this needed to be, and taking it from their concept and building upon it was really the process of winning the job. Obviously, the bid and the numbers have to work for the production, but taking the initial agency concept and then building our treatment, building our visual look and feel and what the style of this thing needed to be was really up to Brett. And he did a great job in building out that concept in the treatment. But we'll show it a little bit. We don't want to give too much away. We don't show all of our treatments or all full treatments on anything, but we'll give you some snippets. And it's really part of the process, right, of showing how that's done. Actually, a good friend of ours, John Briegel from Variable, has a great treatment course if anybody's interested in that, and how to build treatments. So shout out to John if you ever watch this, man.
That's awesome.
I hope people go your way, because building treatments is a whole thing, and that's a huge part of winning the job. Again, the numbers have to work, but once those two things come together, and you do get awarded the job in this competitive triple bid process where other production companies and directors are also fighting for the same job, when you do win, you know that you have a good concept and a good head start, I guess. You're starting off on the right path, and then comes all of the prep.
Having that treatment is the first, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the first visual representation of what the project could potentially look like.
Yes.
That the agency is seeing. So it's important that is like as good as it can be.
Yes.
Going into the project.
Yeah,
with
really.
the project.
It's like you're setting your mission, your approach, your tone, giving an expectation to the agency of how they are going to be creatively fulfilled and also satisfy the client, right? Yeah. The end goal and part of what we do here at Taproot is having a focus on the service and what value we are providing to the end client, even though oftentimes we'll never interface with the agency's client, right? Which in this case is GMC. We don't directly interface with them. That's the agency's client, and our client is the agency.
Right.
And how do we service that? And it really comes from like understanding the needs of the creative, understanding the needs of the agency, and then having the right team in place, the right director to take those things and say, here is how I'm going to bridge the gap between your creative and what I think is possible from a production standpoint.
Making intentional creative choices to accomplish that goal. Part of those creative choices on this shoot, we were shooting, our camera package was the Alexa 35, We were shooting with signature prime lenses. We had drone involved in this as well. Some of the other tools that we used were a techno crane for some of the inside studio shots.
In the bidding stage especially, you're thinking about how you break down the shoot. How do you appropriately put the numbers to how the creative approach is looking? And what we came up with is a 2-day shoot with a lot of prep time on the front side. So we had a 1-day production in the Detroit metro area inside of an actual service center. And that's where we utilized a techno crane. We had a larger crew, and we had 2 talent on this that were in that certified service center. We went through a lengthy casting process, right? But then on the crew side, we had, of course, the techno crane, which requires an op. We had our DP, Jeff Sukes. We had our AC, Tyler Holman, our second AC, our DIT, our VTR, a large G&E team, just because the spaces were quite big. So we had to have ample lighting package. We had to have enough to kind of figure out how to light pretty big spaces.
Yeah.
The producing team, which included myself and Shannon and the director Brett, and it was a little bit more of a technical shoot inside of the service center. And then the second day was actually in northern Michigan, in almost the farthest point you could get up in Michigan, in the Upper Peninsula. And the whole idea of that was we had a smaller budget for what we actually wanted to achieve. So the look and feel of the brand is very Pacific Northwest. It's very like Washington, Oregon, Vancouver,
Outdoorsy.
Outdoorsy, that feeling that you would get kind of in that northwestern space in North America, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, like the money just couldn't get us there.
Right.
So we had to figure out, how do we get that look inside of the budget?
Different
and that's
creative
where,
solution.
yeah, a different creative solution, exactly. And so we landed on, after a lengthy location scout, both Brett, Shannon, our location scout, would go out and several days of trying to pick the right spot. We landed in Marquette, Michigan, which is just a different area. So it's a vast wilderness. Marquette area is actually one of the cities that is up in that area, and we shot one of the few. Yeah, we just shot outside of that at a very amazing location that I hesitate to mention it because the locals will probably be mad, but it really turned out to be perfect. It had a Pacific Northwest feel, sort of mountainous terrain, which you wouldn't expect in Michigan.
Yep.
But that second day was a very nimble, sort of stripped down crew, still utilizing the highest quality package, camera package, lensing, drone, all the things that we needed to match the first day and make this a cohesive spot. This is when you're thinking about production, and especially in the bid, and it's not like we can take the first day, use a techno crane, the best camera, the best cinema lenses, the best crew, and then just go out to a remote location and shoot on a C70. The look is not correct.
Doesn't match.
Those things don't match and they don't work. So really we have to problem solve on how to make those things work. And again, it comes down to the people. I am a firm believer that getting the right crew and the right people in place is the number one solution to getting high quality and elevated spots like this. So
So when was the first phone call that you had to kind of open this project?
I actually know what it was. It was on the Bissell project.
Oh, sure.
So I literally took the phone call
on a different project.
On a different project, and I remember it because I was like, oh, this sounds really interesting. That was probably mid-May, and then June we actually started bidding and got into this. And actually we pushed the shoot because we were permitting in National Forest area. Originally we were supposed to shoot in July of 2024. We ended up shooting in August of 2024.
So another thing that came up during planning lengthened that process from the first phone call to actually being on set on production shooting. In terms of production, we did have a very controlled environment on the first part in the service center
Yeah.
inside. Going into some challenges on this project.
Yeah.
Being outside in the elements obviously is one of those challenges. Moving things. It wasn't a super long hike. It was a nice trail. We did have a little bit of some rough terrain at one point getting out there. But what would you say from either a producing standpoint, seeing this from a 30,000 foot all the way through the process, what would you say a single biggest challenge or a few other challenges were?
Yeah, I always like to frame challenges as like, that's just production. Mm-hmm. Our job is to be problem solvers.
Yeah.
If you don't have that mindset going into it, like, probably not going to go great.
Yeah. Yes.
The thing that I think when I think about challenges is like, well, every production has its challenges, and some people watching this may be like, well, yeah, some of them are disasters, which is true, but it comes down to prep.
Yeah.
And if you're doing the right work in prep, which I attribute to our producing team, I attribute to Shannon, I attribute to Brett figuring out what these shots need to be. I give them all the credit for figuring out how this needs to be done. Mm-hmm. Our job is to make sure that we have the time and the money to solve those problems. In budgets that are small or squeezed, those problems get a little bit more challenging. Mm-hmm. In budgets that are a little bit bigger, listen, like, money makes things easier. Yeah. It makes things go away because you can bring more people on, and the more qualified and specialized people you bring on, the easier it is to solve those problems. This is a great conversation because I think a lot of clients will say, like, why do you need that many people?
Right.
Why do you need these people? Yeah. Like, when I get on set, these people are just standing around. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, that's because in prep, they solved all these problems. Right. And they were hired to solve these problems. So now on production, it's okay that they are not doing anything at that exact moment. Right. They will do something. Yes. And, once we break the take or go to the next thing, move, company move, whatever it is.
Yeah.
There's things that I think happen, like, to not be punny, but like behind the scenes that the client is never seeing.
Right.
And that costs money. Mm-hmm. And the more that you have there, the more problem that can be solved, the more problems that can be solved. But specifically, the challenge really was figuring out a way to get all of our crew from a one-day shoot in the Detroit area to Marquette in a timely manner. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't seem like that's a hurdle. Mm-hmm. If you just think about that, it's like, well, you're still in Michigan. Why is that a big deal?
Right.
If you want to take 10 people and drive them up there, that risk is a bit bigger. Flights are not easy to come by. Going from Detroit to Marquette, there's one a day. Yeah. Luckily, I think we did pretty good. Mm-hmm. We were able to fit that in, and that wasn't originally scoped in the budget. So we had to make some things work. Yeah. So from a challenging perspective, it was, how do we get all of this crew up to a relatively remote location and not have them drive? Mm-hmm. This is probably like, not a fun challenge to think about because people want to talk about challenges of like, did you overcome the weather? Did you overcome the camera falling or what, did a piece of gear break or anything like that? Yeah. And I would say, like, a lot of the challenges, again, are solved in prep. Yeah. And this is one of those challenges that came up that we were able to solve, to our producing team's credit, in prep. Our production manager, Matt Resnick, who has a lot of experience in solving these problems to a high degree. Mm-hmm. We did have one PA drive our camera truck up, which was really a lifesaver, and that brought all of our gear so we didn't have to bring that on the plane. Mm-hmm. So there were like little logistical challenges as part of this shoot that normally wouldn't happen in a shoot where, let's just say you have a 2 or 3 day shoot on location at a house, you bring all the stuff there.
You're leaving it there.
You're leaving, you can leave it there, you make it safe, or you're in a studio, you make it safe. And it also was not a nimble crew where it was like 5 people just going out into the wilderness, which you can make great stuff doing that too, right? Yeah. Like if you're shooting a doc, you can go out 5 people in the middle of nowhere and everybody's chipping in, right? This was a commercial. Yes. So you needed some more tools, you needed monitors for client to review, for agency to approve. Like there's a couple more touches that you need to give that just is not possible without that.
And the trucks too. We had 2 trucks.
The GMC Sierra EV And then the GMC Sierra ICE vehicle, which is the 1500
Yes.
vehicle. And those have to be delivered, right? You have to make it safe. Those are picture vehicles. They are not production models. They have to be parked somewhere. I mean, that's a good point. Like for us, we do this a lot.
Yeah.
So I don't ever consider that a production challenge.
Right.
But it definitely is a thing.
Yeah.
You know, you have to have a parking lot for the vehicle haulers to park in.
Being in that park, had to get permits. There's also a gate that needed to be open that usually isn't, so that we could drive.
I
these
probably
trucks down
take
there.
those like little challenges for granted because, you know, early on, I guess like in my career, those seemed bigger.
Absolutely.
But now they're like expected to be solved, I guess.
Right.
There are a lot of challenges like that.
Definitely.
And I guess I just checkbox those up to like,
For
that's
sure.
normal production.
Yeah.
You know,
absolutely. If you do your job well, you shouldn't really have to do anything. Like
if I'm doing my job well, I'm sitting on set
Yeah.
and things are going
things are
smoothly.
running smooth.
Yeah. Which I would say, like, you know, out in the wilderness, we were all chipping in.
Definitely. Yeah.
Luckily, we have a multi-talented team and people are familiar with production.
Pitch in.
We were setting up lights and helping move stands and carts and, you know, all those things, which is necessary not only at this budget level, but also when you're like in a trail setting with semi-rocky terrain. I don't want to like make this feel like we were climbing Mount Everest. It was not that.
No, it was not.
It was not that. But it was definitely...
for the production with the gear that we have, you have to think differently.
Yes.
When you're out there
Yep.
moving stuff.
It's all heavy.
It's all heavy.
Yeah.
There's many trips.
I definitely got
PAs
winded.
were working it. Yeah.
Yeah.
We were carrying a little cart over some rocks
Yeah.
for like 50 yards
Yeah.
or something like that.
I would say I'm above average fitness, and I was definitely winded.
Yes.
So
yeah, I think it is cool to look at that, and like you said earlier, we weren't able to necessarily go to the Pacific Northwest, but we're still on location. There's a time and place for a volume wall, but all the planning again, especially the light too.
Yeah.
A huge part of this shoot outside, at least, was getting that morning light.
Yeah.
So we were up
I love how
4:30.
you brought that up. I love how you brought the volume wall because I think it's an amazing production tool,
Yes.
but you can never beat a real sunrise. And like, I just want to make that a point, you know, because there's something about virtual production that does solve a lot of challenges, and I love it. Again, I think it's great.
There's a time and place.
There's a time and place for it, and it's a tool. It is a tool that can be used just like a techno crane, just like any other production tool. And I'm probably preaching to the choir here, right? But the feeling of being on location, the wind, the
my
water,
Yeah.
the sun, you're not going to ever convince me that doesn't come through the lens.
Right.
It does.
Yeah.
It 100% does. And
Yeah.
like, leave a comment if you don't think that's true. The truth is, like, you're not going to beat the real world. You're not going to beat on location.
Yeah.
And maybe the technology will get there one day.
But there's even besides like the final product, like to that point, like that, that's fun. Like that is an enjoyable experience. I think that's why like we are doing like what we're doing, is because actually doing that, there's something to the art of that style of traditional filmmaking, right? Like there's an art to volume wall stuff, and there's
For sure.
technical knowledge and things needed to like actually make that happen. But
It's like, what's real?
yeah,
You know,
Right.
I think I would want people to understand that, like, the feeling you get from watching something that is real is different than the feeling that you get from something that is virtual, and it's subconscious.
Yeah.
You don't know that what you're watching necessarily isn't real, and some of it's very convincing. There are very talented people that can make extremely realistic environments. Talented artists, and
production design.
I know them. I love them. I think, you know, they're very good at what they do.
Right.
And this isn't to detract from that, but this is just to say that, like, I guess my opinion, my piece, my 2 cents on this is that you can feel a real location through the lens. You
Definitely.
can feel it in the frame. And when you get an opportunity to go to some of these very unique places, it's just different. I don't want it to sound pretentious either. It's not like we're shooting a feature,
Definitely.
right? Like, we're not making a feature film here. They're 30-second spots. There's 4 30-second spots.
Yeah.
we're just emphasizing like the realness of it, right? I hate like taking ourselves too seriously.
Definitely.
Because it detracts from like the fun of filmmaking, but it is real and versus virtual. And yes, this whole shoot could have been done on a virtual set. It could have. I think it would have been more expensive, honestly, to make all these environments.
Yeah.
But, you know, you just can't beat real. And I think I'm pro real.
I'm pro real too.
Yeah.
So part of this project too is that as Taproot, we are handling all of post-production. So we're editing in-house and we're seeing this project through to its finale. Kind of wrapping up post here, end of September. It's the beginning of September right now as of recording. And this project should be done end of September and be out for distribution in October. Josh, talk us through some of the logistics of post-production.
There's a lot of pieces to line up from, you know, once we wrap the shoot and get into final delivery, we have VO, music licensing, we have VFX for this, we have color, and all those things have to happen kind of in, just like production happens on like this beautiful symphony of people working together, it has to happen on the post side. The real challenge to the post side is that most of our players in the post side are working in different locations. So for instance, for color grading, we're working with Company 3. Our colorist is located in Atlanta. So we're working with the super talented Parker Jarvie on this. And we have to send a drive of footage along with, you know, our timelines, all that stuff to him. And it's a very quick process for that. Then we have to go to the studio, record with Will Arnett. Then we also have to work with sound mixing, which we're going to do here in-house with the very talented Nate Morris. Get our music licensing all settled through the agency and through our partners at MusicBed. So all those things, because of the edit, have to happen on a very compressed timeline. And the process really is like, let's load all the footage, let's get the roughs in, let's have our client in, we'll dial in the edit. Once we lock the edit, all those things have to happen, like boom, 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 boom. So we have about a week and a half turnaround for all of those pieces to line up after the edit is actually locked. And the unique thing about that is that we still provide that same, you know, experience and service that we expect on the production side.
All the way through post.
All the way through post, right? I love having post in-house just because you know what you had on set and you get to really massage that and figure it out.
If you see something and you see a shot and it's like, well, that was an intentional creative choice to light that a certain way. Let's tweak the color to amplify that, to play into those things that we were thinking through on set into post.
I love that there are collaborative filmmakers who want to see their work all the way through. So Brett actually, along with Carl, you know, were able to assemble the edit and get it into a spot that he was really happy with, you know, to start. And then the agency was like, yep, this is exactly what we ordered, right? It's almost like, you know, here's the menu.
Yes.
This is what we picked. You got what you know. Here's the food. It looks exactly like the picture on the menu.
Here's what you ordered.
You know, exactly. So that feels really good. And I love keeping that in-house for that reason. It kind of makes things a little less complicated, but I also value post partners, right? So if we are working with external editors, sometimes they bring in a flavor that you weren't necessarily like thinking about.
Fresh eyes, fresh ears, fresh perspective.
They weren't on set,
right?
So they give you something that you weren't expecting.
There's an unbiased third party touching it, which you get another creative mind on the project with that separation, and it can oftentimes make the project better.
For sure. One thing I learned from Carl early on was like, you may think that you have it in the can, but like, go for that extra take if you have time, right? And this is, you have to listen to your AD, you have to listen to your producer. If it's time to go, it's time to go. But having more for the edit is always valuable.
It's not gonna hurt you.
You're always running into it in the edit of like, man, I wish we had, you know, on the button push, I wish we had like the finger just to the left slightly, just to the down, you know, give me an option for those, right?
Yeah.
Or, you know, I wish we had the tire in this position, or like, there's all of those things. And, you know, Carl's really good at, when he's directing, you know, on set, of like, let's get that option, and pushing it to make sure that we have stuff for the edit. And not all directors think about that. Not all directors think about the edit. Brett did a great job at thinking about the edit too, because, you know, he designed the boards, right?
Yeah.
Be considerate and thoughtful in your approach to your takes, and not just getting more takes for the sake of takes. You can do the same thing over and over and it's going to be the same result, right? But getting options for those takes, it seems like such an easy, like, directing 101 thing, right? Like, give me options, right? Like that is a thing for sure.
Yeah.
But what I love to see from a director is thinking about the edit and thinking about how those takes are going to affect the edit. I'm hopeful that there's a level of humility in not just saying, yeah, we got it, let's move on. You know, it's like, do we have time for another take?
Right.
Let's do one more.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Let's get it.
Inevitably, you're never going to have the perfect take. I don't know one person on set who's ever said, this is exactly how I imagined it. You know, like, I mean, if you're out there, I would love to hear from you, because then I'll be like, well, let's put you up for the job, because if you're getting exactly,
let's work together.
if you're getting exactly what you're imagining, there's no perfect take, right? It's never like how you imagined it in the edit.
Right.
The 3 phases of production, right? You have the sale and prep of the project, you have the production of the project, and then you have the post-production and delivery of the project. And all these things are being considered on that first phone call.
Yes.
You know, like, you're thinking about all of those things, and the feeling you get after everything is wrapped, it's like a feeling of gratitude almost. It's like, man, I'm thankful for being able to do that, the amazing places I got to go, the work and the people I got to work with.
To see it all come full circle from initial phone call to wrapping up post, something deeply satisfying about that process of all the different hands and people that have touched it along the way.
Right.
And like we always talk about, there's the story you write, the story you shoot, and the story you edit. On something like this, where we're boarding out a project, we have an animatic, we already have the edit in mind before we even go.
This is not just prop. That's
real. That's real.
Boards. I was going to show them, but we just never got.
We'll put them in the
edit.
In the video. So it's really cool to see all of that come together.
It's always that collaboration between all the departments to make what comes from the paper into the frame.
Yeah.
And I think like that's really the value of a good collaborative partner, is that if you're working with the client or the agency, you're taking their vision and helping to sculpt that and mold that into what actually comes in the frame. And there's so many people in between that have their touch on that. That's what really makes filmmaking unique.
Yeah. We're glad that you guys came along with us, and there's a lot that goes into something like this, even a 30-second spot. And we're excited and happy that you're here to listen to us break down and peel back the curtain of production. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks everybody. If you have anything you want to add to the conversation, feel free to drop us a comment, and don't forget to subscribe for more of this content. We love interacting with anybody who's watching this.
Yeah, we would love to dialogue with you, whether it's a question about this project or a question about production in general. Gives us ideas for future content and future videos. So thanks for joining us.